On this episode of Get Real with Casey Kasem, I talked with Mike Wright of the Fantasy Footballers. He's a podcast superstar, both with the Fantasy Footballers podcast and the Spitballers podcast. Mike and I talked about being a rock star in this industry, going on live tours with the Fantasy Footballers, being a family man, and so much more. Make sure you check out the Fantasy Footballers wherever you listen to your podcast. Also, make sure that you're following Mike on Twitter, if you're not already, at FFHitman. You can find my writing over with the Fantasy Footballers as well. You can follow me on Twitter at @TheCaseyKasem, as well as follow the show on Twitter at GetReal_pod. This podcast is a proud member of the DAP network, so go check out all of those podcasts as well. And make sure that you rate and review this podcast. Please, please, please. I know it's really hard. I don't do it as often as I should, but if you could, it would mean a lot. You know, the algorithm and all that jazz, just kind of get more ears listening to this podcast would be pretty dope. During this episode, I was having a rough day, and that's no excuse, but Mike Wright is the man, and he made me feel a lot better as we talked, and you know what? Super awesome dude. So go check out our conversation right now. It's about to start right here. It's Mike Wright with the Fantasy Footballers. Let's talk about great stuff. Let's talk about how you started playing fantasy football in the first place.
Okay, we can do that.
So, exactly when did you start playing fantasy football? How did you get started, and why did you start playing?
So I fantasy sports, I was a fantasy basketball guy first. I was far more into the Suns than I was the Cardinals. Like I was a Cardinal fan. But I mean, a long time ago, it was not easy to be a Cardinal fan. Like we would go to, me and my dad, we had season tickets for when they were at the college stadium, the Sun Devil Stadium. So you'd go watch your team get their butts kicked on bleachers in 120 degrees, surrounded mostly by the other team's fans. Like
yeah.
it was tough. And meanwhile, I mean, the Suns, we had two real strong eras. We had the Charles Barkley, Kevin Johnson era, and then we had the Steve Nash era. And like with the Nash, Amari, Stoudemire, Marion years, I'd never missed a Suns game. I mean,
yeah, I see.
I got the cap back on. Well, we're good again. So
there you go.
I'm starting to get hyped. But so I was into fantasy basketball, and then eventually my friends were like, "Hey, let's try a fantasy football league." So I played. I wasn't very good. Kind of went back to basketball. And then I started working with the guys. I started working for Jason over at the video game company, and they had a really hardcore league that was mostly people inside of the office. There was a couple outside, but it was in the office. It was always talked about. And I mean, I was following football at that point. I had become really, really diehard football. Like we had the Kurt Warner Cardinals years, and that really brought me in. So I started caring about other teams. I would watch all the primetime games. It wasn't just watch your own team type of fandom. And they're like, well, we should expand the league and get a couple other guys in, because there was one other guy who also wanted to be in the league. So they went from 10 teams to 12 teams. So I got one of the teams. So that's when I really, really started playing and caring and learning how to play the game, and not just, I take Anquan Bolden and Larry Fitzgerald in the same draft, right? Like they're both really good, so that's how you win. So that's how I started playing, and my first year in the league, it went terrible, but then my second year in that league, I won, and ever since then, I was like, this is the best.
And you started out playing redraft, because most people that I've had
their league was keeper. Right away.
Okay, there you go.
So, I mean, right away it was to get us in the league. We did they already had 3 keepers, and so we did an expansion draft, and so I got to take 3 players, which I was super lucky. I got to take Jamal Charles in an expansion draft, to which point he went on and tore his ACL or whatever it was in week 2.
Yeah,
back in 2011, I think.
Oh man,
I don't know, around there.
I remember that, yeah, because that's like right when I started playing fantasy football too. So I was like, oh yeah, the Jamal Charles years were something special.
Yes, most of them were great, but the time I had him in that league was not good.
Not good. And so you talked about working at the video game company, I know that you shared your story a lot, but for people who may not be as familiar with your story as some of us are,
sure.
How did that whole thing come about? How did you end up the job? How did you guys all get together and do that?
I'll do you one up. I'll go back a step or two.
Okay.
For where the origin story usually starts.
Alrighty.
But so I was a musician. I met my wife. We were both playing at a church, and I trick her. I convince her that I'm good, and we get married. And so I'm doing musician stuff, like producing music at a studio, doing theater shows, just all the random crap that you can actually make money as a musician, it's very difficult. We start talking about having kids, and I'm like, okay, I'm supposed to be a grown up now, and well, so what am I going to do? And video games has always been something I loved. Like at that, I don't really get to play anymore, unfortunately. But back then, I played everything, man. I still buy everything and pretend I'm going to play it, but it just sits
right
there. And I say, okay, well, what should I do? Like, well, how awesome would it be to make video games? So I go to a trade school, not a trade school. It was a certified, one of those for-profit schools that halfway in you go, I should not have gone here. But now I'm I've already paid for half of this thing. I should probably get my degree and finish the school. So I make it all the way through, and about halfway through, I realize I'm never going to be good enough at art. I'm never going to be good enough at these other things for video games to compete with professionals. I never will. But I'm good at audio. I could do music. So I start pouring myself into learning how to make music for video games, doing all of that type of stuff. Then I graduate. I eventually go to a meeting, which IGDA, I think, International Game Designer Association, but just like it's a worldwide group, and then they have smaller chapters. So I go to that. I go to a meeting. The guest speaker is Jason, because Jason is an owner of a very successful video game company that is actually based in Arizona. Like, we living so close to LA and California, most of the stuff is just over there. And so the talent gets siphoned off. It goes over there. Well, Jason actually had a company. I, of course, immediately went and chatted him up at the end, gave him my card, and he's like, we actually might have a spot or just a job that we need music for. Like, it's looking like that. So some time goes by, we eventually connect, and then I get hired. So then I start working for them for a couple years. So then the way that turned into the podcast was the league, the hardcore league, it starts to consume you, because we make video games, but we talked about fantasy football. That's what we did. And it was always, how do you make this league even more absurd and ridiculous in the best possible way? And it was, well, we do live drafts. Okay, let's get an announcer. We'll make one of our buddies wear a suit, and he's going to read all the picks. We're going to turn them in on note cards, and we're all going to have music play while our draft picks. And then one year it was, what if we did a podcast just for this league? We'll talk about the league. We'll talk about how stupid everybody is for the moves that they made, the good trades, the good moves that people have done. So Andy and I would do that once a week on lunch. We would do the podcast, and the people in the league loved it. It was really, really fun to make. And we said, hey, let's try and make one that's like public. Because I don't even remember, 2013, somewhere around there. And at that point, like, fantasy football writing on the web, it was already getting to the point where it's tough. It's tough to break in and get your voice heard.
Right.
Podcasting at that time was ESPN at the top, CBS, the football guys had their podcast out there. and maybe a couple other people and some other shows, but no one was going toe to toe with the big guys. It was ESPN, CBS. Those were the kings at the top. And we said, there's a spot here. Let's see if we can do it. Mm-hmm. And so we start, and we are just awful. We are the worst. All the fun was gone from the show. We start speaking like we're where we think we're supposed to, instead of just talking, instead of just being a human being, as all of a sudden we felt our neckties just like metaphorically grew when we would do the show.
Right.
And we're like, this show sucks. Like, what are we doing wrong? And then eventually you realize, well, it's because we're not having fun, and we're trying to be TV reporters, and we're not being ourselves. So we cut loose. We start having fun. Our video game company unfortunately starts going under, and we say, well, everyone's trying to find a new job. Let's bring Jason in. Let's get a third voice in here. Jason, you know who Jason is. Jason's like the funniest person I know, and he's great on the mic. He could talk about football and bring more fun. So let's bring him in. Let's see if we could do something while everyone's trying to find a real job that they're going to pay the bills and the mortgage with. And in the course of one off season, it really showed signs of life of, fellas, if we commit to this, we can make it work. This is gonna turn into a full-time job if we dedicate and make the sacrifices and budget. Say, like, spend your money wisely, because we're not gonna make money for a while. Which thankfully we were able. We look back, we have no idea how we did it.
No, I get that. Even with what I was, yeah.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just gonna. I mean, I just remember. Yeah, I'm looking back in my 20s. I'm like, how did I survive? And then, like, how did I afford to like have my own place and eat?
Yeah. So we're not sure how we made it, but we made it, and then we just kept going, and we've been full time since then.
And when you first started the podcast, it was just you and Andy, correct? That were doing
the original. The original. We were still in the video game job when we tried to do that, and we started like halfway through a season, went through the end, and then everything fell apart, and then just over that off season, we brought Jason in, and then we made this part of, like, we don't know exactly, why was the show successful. There's a couple things that we believe and can point to, but we were hardcore fantasy football people and as soon as the season ended, I want to talk about next year. And the radio stations stop. Like Sirius XM, they go to baseball. The other podcasts, they stop. No one's talking about football. And as we're having business meetings and planning, like, how are we going to actually do this? Okay, do we wait till training camp where people care? The mainstream media is starting to talk about it. Football buzz is growing. We said, but we want this show is made for us, and we want people talking about football right now. So let's go. So we started the show like a couple weeks after the Super Bowl, if I'm not mistaken. So, prime time to start a redraft football show.
Right.
What we did, and I think that helped us pull, at least in the beginning, get the snowball going of pulling in some of the hardcore players like us who just want to talk about football all the time.
All the time. That's right. And then, have you gone back and listened to any of the older episodes?
No, never.
Can I give you
No, I have. I have.
I listened to the first one today.
Oh no!
Or whatever. Yeah. Well, yeah. So,
I'm sorry.
That is not why I was in a bad mood when I started. It was good. I was like, oh man, this is awesome. Like going back in time machine, but yeah, it was pretty dope. It just was a different dynamic. It was, you could tell.
Yeah, and I mean, it's good. You should be able to go back a year and listen to yourself and go, ooh. Like, if you aren't cringing when you heard yourself a year ago, that means you aren't growing. That means you are not getting better. That means you go back, you're like, yeah, a year ago, that I found it already. I peaked out, found the pinnacle. I was already crushing. Thank goodness that I have not changed a thing.
Exactly, yeah. You guys have such great chemistry, and I know you guys have been friends for a while. Why do you think that it is so important to have that kind of chemistry if you're doing a podcast?
Sure. It's taken some time to figure it out, and it's one of those, like, it's the simplest answer, but sometimes the simplest answers are very difficult to put your finger on.
Right.
And it is simply, people like fun. People like to have fun. And if I can't be having fun, I mean, it's like, Casey, when do you listen to podcasts?
When I'm at work.
Right. Okay. I'm at work. I'm commuting. I'm at the gym. I'm doing chores. You are doing things that, generally speaking, most people would say are not fun. Now, I know there's people like their jobs. I'm not saying that, but people like working out. But you are doing something where you are not actively in fun mode. You're in work mode. I'm getting something done, but I'm listening to people have fun, and it's just
Right.
it's contagious. When you listen to someone laughing, it makes you laugh. You know, watching, it's just like if you sit down by yourself and you throw on a comedy, you might chuckle out loud a few times, but you take that exact same movie, you surround yourself by other people who start getting in a good mood, and they start laughing out loud. Your laugh will get louder because because fun is contagious.
Yeah.
It's necessary for humans. So I think that's the simple answer is, we have tons of fun recording, and that translates, and then people have fun because we are having fun. We're their proxy for having a good time. They're like, I can't have a good time right now, so I'll listen to these guys have a good time.
Oh, yeah, and I'll be at work with my, earbuds in and start laughing at something. One of you guys, and then I'm like, people are staring at me like, what are you listening to? Yeah. So
Good.
it does make the day better. And it is fun to listen to you guys, and the fact that you guys put out so much content and you guys put out as many podcasts as you do. How, I know that this is your full-time job, so that makes it easier, but how do you manage to be able to do everything that you do, without going too, too off, off your rocker?
Burnout is real.
Yeah.
Like, no matter what job you have, when you are in the grind of the football season, where, I mean, these are long days, right? And the only time we actually really have off are Friday afternoons, sort of, and then Saturday. But and at the same time, you still need to be plugged into social media. You got to be plugged into the news, ready to change your rankings at a moment's notice when someone gets ruled out, someone's injured. You got to go tweak something. So in season it's a marathon, and you just have to be ready for it. And by what's nice is the flow of the season refuels you. You get to like week 8, week 9, you're like, oh man, I am burning out. Because you're giving and giving and giving. But then the playoffs start coming in, and hopefully I'm in my own playoff hunt. And I was like, I mean, usually, most of the time, I'm in the playoff hunt. So that starts perking you up. You're in the playoff push, and then you start hearing from listeners of how they are also in the playoff hunt. You're like, okay, man, I got to be on my game here. There's a lot of people listening, a lot of people relying on my advice right now. I got to make sure that I'm not just shooting garbage, just crap out of my mouth right now. And so that kind of fuels you up again. And then you get to the end of the season where, yes, inevitably, I mean, only one person in every league gets to win, unfortunately. But, after week 16 spills through, you get all of those comments of, I've never won my league. I've been playing for 15 years. I just listened to your podcast. This was the first year I've ever listened, and I won. And those types of comments really go a long way of fueling you back up, where you get to take at least a couple months and breathe easier. Like we're in that period right now. We're in the middle of March where there's still a lot going on, but you're in recuperate mode, and we are like a thing that helped us be successful is we've approached this as a business.
Right.
It's the primary thing is the podcast. You want the podcast to be good and authentic and fresh and all of these things, but you still have to, you're running a business, and because if you don't run a business, then you're doing this for free, and it's not going to work. Like you're eventually going to be done, So part of our business is in season, grind it out, marathon. Out of season, we're into development mode where we get to start thinking creatively of what can we build? How can we make our draft kit better? What can we do to our website? How do we engage with people in a different way? So that it's at least cyclical of different times of the years mean different hats get to be worn by us. So we also refuel getting to do that. You start looking forward to, oh, fellas, January's coming up. I got some ideas here for our development team that I'm really excited to start working on. So all of those little small things help keep you sustained when you really start to feel worn out.
Great. That's great advice. Because I know people talk about it all the time, getting burned out, but yeah, it is a real thing in all kinds of stuff. I mean, I've been burned out before, and yeah, people need to learn that sometimes you just have to like step away for a second and get your breath.
Like I imagine even, world famous rock stars, like you're playing in front of an arena of tens of thousands of people. But if you keep doing that for months on end, and like, to me, that's the coolest job in the world. And you're like, I would never get tired of that. But no, I guarantee those people get tired. And they're like, oh man, I do not want to do a show. This is the last thing I want to do. So no matter what you do, you face times of burning out. So you got to make sure you're taking care of yourself.
And if there's a day that you are just having an off day and you just don't feel great about, anything, and then you have to come on to the podcast, how do you handle, not coming off like today's been such a horrible day?
I will say it's number one is practice. I mean, we're at the point now where we're so many years in, when the lights come on and the music hits, it really changes your mental state. But even when it doesn't, and you're like, man, this ain't it, I got two other people that are good friends that I can lean on. I can have a show where maybe my analysis, I'm a little quieter this go around, and I'm just gonna let Jason. This is a Jason show. I'm gonna let him take care of business because he's feeling it. I'm not. So it really helps that there's the three of us. I mean, the people that are the solo people on the microphone. Whew, man,
yeah, that's why I'm glad that I at least have somebody to talk to on here. I'm not just like talking.
Right, and you get a fresh face like every time.
Yeah, every time. So, and you guys get to do the bulk of the work for me anyway. So it makes it even better. How is being in the same room, being in the same studio with the people that you're podcasting with? Because I know a lot of people that have podcasts and have, co-hosts, they can't be in this. They've never even met before,
Right.
So how is that feeling, and how do you think it would be different if you guys had to do it all, remotely from wherever
we definitely at the beginning felt like this is a special sauce that no one else, well, not nobody else, but most people don't have the luxury of having. Back when we started, like I said, the CBS guys are in a room. You can tell the ESPN people are together, but you hear all the other indie people they're doing it over. Well, back then it was Skype, I imagine. So the fact that we can react in real time, you're not doing the whole.
Right.
Where I feel like I'm stepping on someone. I don't know when you're going to talk. I have full physical body communication going on. I can do I put my hand up so they know I'm going to talk, or don't interrupt me right now. I'm like I'm going, and it creates a much more casual conversation. Now, we got to experience remote life this year,
yes.
where we spent the majority of the off season remote, and we did it all on Zoom. We were trying to be as safe and COVID protocol as we possibly could. So we got to experience that. I think we had a leg up of just our natural conversational instincts of having worked so long together in the same room, that it was not as rough as it could have been. But it's always a wild thing when you and we would go back and forth sometimes, right?
Right.
Where like we got back into the studio, and then you look at Arizona, all the numbers are going up, guys, we should probably go back home. And that first virtual show is always you get to the end and go, was that a good show? I have no read on if that was a good show or not. And we lean on Brooks and Jeremy, and they're like, no, guys, good show. Don't worry about it. We're like, okay, I'm trusting you guys, because that show could have been great. That show could have been awful. I have no idea right now.
And being the COVID situation that we've had to deal with, the pandemic that was going on or still going on, but in the time when you guys had to work, from home, and you couldn't, be in the same room together, how excited and how happy were you to be able to get back in the studio and know for sure, like, yeah, we're going to be in the same room again, and it's going to be, more relaxed.
It was wild. And just like the first virtual show was always weird, the first in-person show is like, this is kind of weird too. Your muscle memory eventually kicks back in, but is jarring going back, and it sounds kind of weird and dumb, but going back and forth, it's very bizarre.
Yeah.
But it was so nice to be back when the season hit, man. When that first kickoff happened on that first game, I mean, everyone was at home because like we're all watching the game at home, but it's just the celebration that took place on our Slack channel of like, holy crap, they did it. We did it. Like, this is unbelievable. The season is happening. It's going to happen. Like, it's real. It wasn't just they're just the carrots on the string, and then at the last second they're just gonna take it right away from us. So that kickoff and then getting into studio for the shows was a very triumphant time that was much rejoiced.
Did you ever think, oh man, there's not going to be a football season? How is the podcast going to?
Yes.
Did you guys have a plan for what you would do if the season got canceled?
Yeah. I mean, we started talking about things of what do we do with the business? How do we make sure our employees are taken care of? What do we do with these contracts of like, we have, we have someone sells our ads for us. And we've told them we can hit these numbers. What happens if we can't?
Right.
So yes, in June was a very dark time for me, where you couldn't convince me. It was the season was not happening. We're hosed. How are we going to survive as a business to make it through to next year, when there will actually be football? How can I make sure that all of my employees, all these people I've committed to, their families are depending on me? Like their children eat because we pay them. And I'm like, what are we doing? Is my savings account just about to be lit on fire, and I'm not going to get paid for a year? Like June was rough. June was very, very, I mean, I know everyone had very taxing moments, has had, and some still are having it, but for me in particular, last June was really, really taxing mentally.
And once you found out that there is a season and you guys are, amped up to get started with actual in-season stuff, how do you, when you guys talk about the things, on your show about player A or player B or whatever, and you use stats, but you also appeal to just like, the casual football fan as well. How do you make sure you balance it so that you're, coming off entertaining, but you're making sure to get the, the juicy stats out there as well?
Right. mean, the easy cop out answer is just that we've done it for so long, and we intentionally started that way. Where when we were making our business, formulating how are we going to do this, we built the show, and it's whatever. This might sound cheesy, but this is what we did. We said, what are the most important things for the show? Like, how can a fantasy football podcast be successful? You're like, okay, number one, the information does have to be good. You can't give crappy information. You have to know what you're talking about. No one hits 100% of the time, but you need to know what you're talking about. Number two, the show has to be entertaining, because at the time, hold on. So, and then the third one is your audio quality has to be good. The people putting up independent podcasts back then, they were going to sound like this. And you're like, I can't even make out the words that these people are saying. And it felt like no one had this triforce of power where all three of these things. It was, okay, they have good audio quality, and they know what they're talking about, but I'd rather die than listen to this show, because this is the worst. Like, there's no entertainment value going on. Or just, flip the triangle however you want. It felt like there was, in the independent space, no one had all three of those things. So we determined that we're going to have all three of those things. And part of that was, for the entertainment step, was we can't be a spreadsheet. There are definitely people out there who want the spreadsheet podcast. And great, more power to you. But we made the decision of our podcast is going to be the widest net possible. It's going to be for the mainstream. Good. A lot of people shy away from that. If I'm not mainstream, I'm not selling out, I'm hardcore. Like, no, we want our show to be successful.
Right.
We want the most people listening to it. So while we are doing those stat sheet super nerd things, we try to, when we present them, we try to present them in the most consumable way possible, where it's not just getting the numbers are getting done, but we're trying to make sure that you're not just getting bogged down in numbers. When you're just listening to an audio product and all you hear is just number, like, by the fourth number, you're done, man. You're not following it anymore, and that's me now. Like, I understand what people are talking about, but even I'm like, okay, no, I'm done, man. I can't handle this. Like, you have to make things consumable that it's pleasant to listen to, and people can really grasp onto what you're talking about.
And when you guys first started the podcast, how were your nerves and how did you feel? Because there's people out there that are listening to this right now that are like, I want to start a podcast, but I don't even, I don't know if I could be in front of a camera or behind a microphone.
Right. The answer to that is just go. Just sit down, start recording. Here's the bad news. You're going to suck. You're going to be terrible. You're going to be nervous. You're going to come across that way. It doesn't matter. Because the only way to actually get better is to do it, and record yourself, do your show, and listen to it. Listen to yourself and critique yourself. Realize what you're doing wrong. How can I get better? Who are the people that I admire? And what are they doing with their voice and the way that they're speaking, the speed at which they are going, which some people are real fast. Some people put huge pauses in. There's no right or wrong. It's simply what is appealing to you, and just knowing you're going to be bad, but you're going to get better. Like, no one jumps on a bike and they're like, sweet, I'm mastered. I'm really good at riding this bike. No, you're going to eat S. You're going to do it. It's part of learning about it. And that's okay. Like, that being okay that you're going to be bad is such a huge hurdle for anything in life. And it's funny because, like, when you're a kid and a teenager, we just are. We seem like we're more willing to fail, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then you turn into an adult, and I'm so serious in business. I don't do that because I'm bad at it. But if you did it, you'd get better at it. Yeah, but I'm bad at it, so I don't do it. That's a really weird way to live your life for something that you actually want to do.
Right. Is there a thing that you think people overthink when they're creating a podcast? Something that they take too seriously or focus on too much when it really doesn't need to be like that?
It's the number one is yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you, especially this, you're making a podcast about fantasy football.
Uh-huh.
Take a couple steps back and realize what you're doing. You are talking to other people about a game that is completely based on another game that you have little control of what the actual players do. Like, you realize that we're all super nerds and we are doing something incredibly nerdy, and that's great because we like it and we enjoy it. But you have to realize that, and I think when you can objectively look at what you're doing as you're doing something that's ridiculous, but being okay with it, then you realize I don't have to take this too serious. You know, it's I am not infallible. I'm not perfect. You know, I'm gonna get things wrong, but I'm gonna have a good time and I'm gonna do the best that I can at it. And I think that really helps once you stop taking yourself super serious. You know, and I still struggle with that of like when you're wrong, you know, like I can be a stubborn person when I'm wrong about something, because you're like, no, but I was gonna be right, and you're like, but you were wrong, and it's okay, and just it's okay to laugh at yourself that you were that wrong. And so that's a big tip of like, you don't when you're wrong, don't just dig your heels in. It's okay. You were wrong. Laugh at what you got wrong. Embrace your mistakes.
You got to. You have to roll with the punches. And
yes,
when you were a kid, because you were talking about how kids, you know, they're not afraid to fail. When you were a kid, did you ever think that obviously fantasy football, you know, analyst and podcast host and writer and all that jazz wasn't a thing that you like ever could have in a million years thought of. So as a kid, what did you want to do when you grew up?
Rock star.
You know, rock star, hardcore.
Everything was music. I was a front man. I wrote all of our music for my band. I had zero doubts that I was going to be a world famous musician, and I would be, you know, just crushing touring arenas, doing all of that stuff. So that's 100% what I was going to do. And then eventually you hit your early 20s and go, oh, well, maybe that's not going to work out.
I had Kyle on, Kyle Borgononi,
right.
and he was talking about, like, was bringing up the fact that you guys go on tour and stuff and how you guys are rock stars. And he said, yeah, Mike definitely, like, he would love to hear that. So, speaking of going on tour, though, you guys you guys have been on 2 tours. How many tours have you guys been on?
We did 2 years of it.
2 years of it. And what was that experience like, being in front of people and you know, taking questions from the crowd and things like that?
Awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, it really did. It does. I mean, hopefully we'll be able to do things like that again. We will. When we're able to do things like that again. It really does scratch that performance itch for myself and for Jason. Like, Jason, we're different types of performers, but Jason was a comedy guy. Like, he was, you know, he was a member of the Groundlings. You know, I think he was convinced he was going to be on Saturday Night Live. He was in college for theater, you know, so he was already adapted to live performance too. And then we had to drag Andy in and be like, "This is what we're doing, man. It's going to be awesome." You know,
that's crazy.
But so it is very surreal and bizarre, especially the beginning. So we did I can't remember if it was the first year or the second year, but it might have been the first year. I don't know. So we kicked things off with a show in Minnesota, and we had done a live show or two in Arizona, in our home state, in a small, just cool venue where there's like 200 people there or something like that.
Right.
And we go to Minnesota, and we walk in this venue, and we're like, guys, do you see how many freaking seats are in this place? And the show was sold out. We're like, oh, this is a problem. And so the nerves start kicking up from there. And we had hired a company to live stream this show because it was the kickoff of the tour. And it was like, okay, man, the nerves are starting to rise. And so the show kicks off. We go running on stage, and I mean, this place is loud. It's a rock show. This is absurd. We're about to talk about fantasy football, and people are just going insane. And then we start the actual recording, and they got even louder. Jeez. And I'm getting chills just thinking about it again. But like that video is on our YouTube, so as soon as the graphic stops and it's us and the crowd is still going insane, you can see both Jason and me are like about to just full ugly cry because we're so overwhelmed with the response of these people. And it's this strange sort of connection. It's a forced connection happening all at once where we aren't live performers in the sense of musicians, everything is live, mm-hmm. That's how you get it done. We sit in a room and there's the three of us and then our producers, but there's just a handful of people in this room. We know a lot of people are listening. I don't see them. I interact with them digitally on Twitter mm-hmm. and some other places, and they support us on Patreon. So I know those are real people, but I don't see them.
Right.
And so this just absolute tidal wave of like, okay, these people are real. They really like the show. They're supporting us. It was a truly an unforgettable moment and I'm super glad it's captured on camera because it's really funny. The thing that stopped me from full crying was I looked over at Jason, who had to like be wiping his face. And so it kind of knocked me out of my emotional hysterics where I start laughing at him for being so ridiculous. But it's fun if you find it. It's a good clip.
And going on tour like that and doing it for something different than just, being in music, but doing a podcast, you guys were kind of on that first wave of like going out and actually touring with a podcast, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And so how did you guys choose what cities you guys were going to go the first time around? Because I've never been on tour, so obviously I don't know how the inner workings of all that is.
Sure. I mean, the honest truth is we know where people are downloading our show. We have mm-hmm. statistics, and it was, let's not be embarrassed by, we announced that we're doing a show, and mm-hmm. there's 400 tickets available, and then 20 people buy tickets. So, I mean, it's one of those things where, unfortunately, I'm sorry, person in North Dakota, mm-hmm. we're not gonna go there.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. You want to see us?
They're probably used to it though, like
yeah.
bands and stuff.
You're gonna have to drive to a major market. So that's the honest truth of, we picked major markets where we knew that there was a huge pocket of our listeners, and that the show would go over well, and people would be there, and it would just be a good time for everybody.
How awesome has it been to be able to, go do things that you never in a million years thought you'd be able to do, like travel like that? And
right.
What's been some of your, top moments that you've had because this job's made it available for you?
I mean, so the kickoff of that Minnesota show was wild. We did a back-to-back, where must have been Philadelphia and then to New York City, I think something like that. I don't know. It was two of the East Coast cities that were really close, and we did the show, and then we immediately packed everything. Well, not immediately. I mean, we hang out, we meet everybody, and so now it's 11 o'clock or whatever, and it's okay, fellas, we're gonna jump in an Uber and we're gonna drive to New York and we're gonna do a show tomorrow. So I mean, it was like this. It was a real small thing, but it's like, man, this is crazy. Like, this is what I thought I was gonna be doing, except I thought I was gonna be singing and playing my guitar. Instead, I'm talking about football to an audience of toasty people who are having a good time, and I'm like on the fly having to learn how to crowd control from the stage. I'll tell you,
that's crazy.
Philadelphia people are rambunctious. They have a lot to say, as did the people in San Francisco. Those people were rowdy, and they had opinions, and they wanted to share their opinions with us.
I can't even imagine. I didn't.
So that's cool. But the ultimate is the end of the show, because we're like, we announce. I can't promise this is every show, but this in the couple years we did it, we'd say, hey, everybody, we're gonna stick around, like just give us a second to catch our breath, and we're gonna come out and we'll say hi to as many people as we can and take some pictures and everything. And that takes it, at each show that's been over an hour, where it's the majority of people line up at the end of the show, and these people at the back of the line, these people are waiting over an hour just to come up, shake our hands. Sometimes they have a championship story that they want to share with us and take a picture. And it's like, when you're getting to the end of the line there, like, holy crap, these people figured out how to bought a ticket. I mean, going to a live show is a hassle. Like, I'm old. I got to figure out a lot of stuff to get to a show. Not only did they do that, they waited in a line for an hour just to meet me. So that is, those moments are incredibly gratifying and very humbling. Of like, these are real people that we're making connections with. I don't know them. They know me, and we are definitely, but we have a connection on a very human level, despite the way that it's me on a podcast talking about fantasy football.
Do people come up to you when you're out and ask you, like, recognize you and go, yo, I need some fantasy advice?
Sometimes
sometimes
it's not all the time, but it has happened a few times. My favorite story of that is like Disneyland is it's a lock. Like, when we go to Disneyland, granted we go for like 4 days, like there'll probably be 2 people at least who recognize me, but I give my wife crap. Like, I pretend like I'm a big shot. So we're at Disneyland. This is a couple years ago, and I say, okay, I'm going to apologize. I'm very sorry that there are going to be so many people who want to take pictures with me, and they recognize me, and she's just like, like hitting me. She's like, shut up, stop being so, like, just really, really good friendly banter. But I'm sorry. It's going to happen. And this is just something that you are going to have to deal with, that you are married to a super celebrity. And we walk into Disneyland and we take 5 steps and someone shouts out, Hitman!
Oh, man.
And I just erupt in laughter, and my wife goes, no.
No.
So, I mean, we're 10 steps into Disneyland, and someone already recognized me and wanted to take a picture. It was in front of everyone. It was my entire family. So I'm like,
oh, man.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
That is awesome. That is just funny how that worked out. You guys are on YouTube as well. Was it like 2015 or something like
We
that?
we,
You
we
guys
did
hopped over?
YouTube. We did YouTube almost right from the very beginning.
Oh, okay. Being on YouTube and the connection with people getting to actually see you guys and see you interact. How important do you think YouTube has been to your podcast?
Massive.
Yeah.
Massive. The decision to invest in YouTube has been massive for us, where it was a huge investment. So the origination of the YouTube, very funny. So we we were shoestring budgeting the podcast. First
Right.
of all, part of Jason joining was he had to buy an audio interface that took more than 2 microphones, because that's all we had.
Yeah.
And he had to buy a microphone. So it was like, dude, if you wanted the show, you're gonna have to foot the bill for this stuff. And it was I'm like, we're doing the show. I'm trying to remember how, because somehow I was inspired by Pat Mayo, because the Fantasy Sports Network launched like right around us, maybe a year or two before us, and
Yep.
I'm watching Mayo, who's great, but Pat Mayo
I'm talking to him later.
Good. Mayo's a super good dude. And they have like switching cameras and everything. So I start looking around and find this iPhone app that lets you set up everyone's iPhone, and then there's like a master iPhone that at the end takes all the recordings from each iPhone and you like compiles them, right? So you're using one live, and so you can switch between the cameras, make it look like you have a multi-camera production. It's like this $15 app, but getting the information from those phones to the master phone that's going to compile this took forever. And so the beginning of the show, we're in Andy's house. We took over his kid's bedroom, but we would take the phones and we would record at night. So like after everyone had done the job, so sometimes we wouldn't start recording till 10, 11 at night. And then we would have to do this whole video process where we would take the phones down. So we would creep downstairs silently, put the phones next to the router so that that they could transfer faster onto the main phone. And it was absolutely ridiculous. And so we're investing hours and hours of time for 5 people to watch. It took a long time for the YouTube to actually gain traction. The podcast is already very successful,
right?
But we're still investing money, and then we start buying cameras and really investing financially into the video part of the business, saying we believe YouTube is the future. I mean, I all of us were, but just from my side of the story of like, think of the younger generation where those kids they don't watch TV anymore. I mean, I guess they stream like Netflix and stuff and things but they're on YouTube. I've seen the power of it with my kids, where you give them the choice between the two. They'll jump on an iPad and watch YouTube, and they could do that for 12 straight hours and not even realize what just happened. They're just on YouTube watching Minecraft videos. I'm like, those kids are eventually going to want to play fantasy football.
Yeah.
They're going to age into it. And so it felt like a really important thing for us to invest into. And then, I mean, it really hit this like critical mass where we were grinding and grinding and grinding. And finally the views really started to have an impact on the show, when we're telling, hey, people want to buy an ad. Guess what? You have all these downloads on the podcast. We also have the biggest fantasy football YouTube, and we get X amount of views on the YouTube. And so it really started to matter, and then it snowballed. And now the YouTube is a huge part of what we do. It's a huge chunk of our listens. I mean, not a listen, but listens, download, view, whatever.
I don't get to watch the YouTube that often, just because, like I said, I listen at work, so it's hard to do. But yeah, it is great. And like with your 1000th episode when you guys had that. I mean, watching that was something I had,
man.
Was something that I wanted to do, so I waited to actually watch it. So how was that? I know I'm asking you how it felt for a lot of things, but I really want to know the feelings and everything about having that 1000th show when you had your very first show ever. I even remember you guys were, I listened to it today, so I don't remember, but you guys were like, wait, maybe we'll be back, it depends, so we'll see. And then you guys are at 1000. What was that experience like?
It was, I mean, the recording was, it was a very overwhelming thing and it was nice we had something to look forward to. I mean, we're in the middle of the season, we're in the grind. And like I said, of trying to find those events to help fuel you, and you get to show 980. And I almost never pay attention to what episode we're on, but it's right there. It's in every show doc, what episode we're on. And then you see it, you're like, holy crap, 980? Fellas, we are closing in on show 1000. And then it turned into, what are we going to, like, that's a big thing. We need to have a plan. And so we're sort of talking about it. And then our producers, Brooks and Jeremy, are like, don't even worry about it. Just show up. And we're like, oh, this is fantastic. Like, wait, so we're going to have a special episode, and I don't have to plan it. I don't have to stress out about it. So they went way over and above with that 1000th episode of just, I mean, reaching out to our friends, getting our friends tonight, our industry friends to say nice things about us, like looking back. And then the culmination of they snuck our wives in at the end without us knowing about it. So it was that, like, when we hit the end of that show, not that we hadn't already had, certain feelings of like, we've done something, but at the end of that show, it felt like, guys, we have done something here. We have made a mark. We have made an impact on we're a niche. We're a silly little fantasy football show, but we've really made an impact on people. It's not just us. I mean, the impact is huge for me and my family, but we've made an impact on lives out there.
And if you guys haven't seen that, you guys need to go watch it. Like, if you just listen to it, you didn't get the full effect. You need to watch it because the emotion on all of you guys' faces.
Yeah, there was definitely some weeping.
So I want to know also, because you guys have a website, and there's articles on there. There's all your awesome,
Yes, there is, Casey.
Well, yeah, I mean, there is. There's articles on there, but we'll get to that. No, and you guys have like so much stuff. Your ranks are there. You've got everything, and Foot Clan is such a huge, just massive overtaking of fantasy football world. Like, what is the importance of the Patreon and having the Foot Clan, like, being able to communicate with you through Patreon, all the perks that they get? How big of a tool has that been for you guys?
So the Patreon, there were two seminal moments in the business. And the first, or I don't know, I don't even remember the order. So I apologize, I don't remember the order. But the draft kit was one that changed the stability of the business, and the Patreon. So football is very seasonal.
Yes,
it's just a couple months out of the year, and we wanted to be a year-long show,
right?
So at the beginning, we would. The way that we thought about the business was simply in buying months to stay open until we can get back into the football season, and we would do our ad deals around that. And we'd look at the books, and it was, okay, guys, we have money through March. How do we get that all the way back to August? And then on top of that, the way that a lot of these companies would pay us back then would be net 90. And if you're not familiar, like I wasn't familiar with this stuff, net 90 means these people are going to pay you 90 days after you have accumulated the numbers. So, and the way that it works is a podcast has X amount of time to hit the downloads that you promise. So it has that time, and then 90 days after that, they're going to pay you. So you might not get paid for an ad for 4 or 5 months, and you had to figure out, how are we going to get money? How are we going to stay open? How am I going to pay my mortgage this month? And the Patreon changed that, because the Patreon then turned from these super sporadic, when is the money going to come into, every month we know that there's going to be some money coming in, because there's going to be fans supporting us. And so that changed how we were able to function as a business, how we're able to look at everything, and so we take the Patreon extremely serious. Of, we want these people to have value. And so that's how we've looked at that. But it changed everything for the business, that we could have an actual month stabilizing income on a monthly basis to help us stay open through the off season until we get back into when the listenership is really exploding during football.
And did you guys have the website from the start, or was that something that came in later? Because listening to the first podcast, you guys plugged it, but I don't know how long before it was there.
Yeah, we had the website pretty soon after we launched, because Andy's job at the video game business is he could make websites, and he was super awesome at web design. So we were able to have a website, but we hadn't fully figured out what does the website have. Why should people go to the website? You just do that because this is the hub of where we are. You can get to the podcast from there, but there's other ways to get to the podcast, and so our rankings are there. And so I feel like for at least a couple seasons, it was the only reason to go to the website was just rankings. That was really it, before we started building out tools like the Ultimate Draft Kit, and then figuring out Patreon and getting like, okay, well, let's build tools for the Patreon supporters that are like in season stuff. So yeah, the website took a while to get going, but now I think we've got a good thing going over there now.
And you guys, I know you. Listening back again, I'm going to go back to the first episode that you guys ever put out, but you guys were talking about how you both were with Fantasy Pros, doing blurbs and all that jazz, and you were following the Saints, correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay.
You're right. I had to think about it for a second. So yeah, my first. I'm just thinking of like how much information do I give here?
Oh man!
But my first step into fantasy football, which I mean, like the at this time the video game business was, you could see the writing, and it's like, okay, well, what am I gonna do? Well, Fantasy Pros opened up that they wanted to essentially try and compete with Roto World and have a news desk, have blurbs, and the way that they went about that was they just put a cattle call out, and I was like, oh, I am doing this. This is, yeah, absolutely. So I got in, I got put in on the Saints. So anytime there was Saints news, I would blurb about that. And I was aggressive of reaching out. So Blaine, shout out, what up, Blaine? Really good dude, works over at Fantasy Pros. I'm like, how can I help more? How can I help more? And eventually I got to be, the lead of the NFC South, which really just turned into me, because no one was getting paid for anything. It turned into me writing blurbs for the Saints, making sure everybody else was doing their blurbs, which meant that no one else was doing them. So I was just writing all the NFC South blurbs. On Sundays after the games, I would have to go and look, okay, who wrote about how Jameis Winston did for the Bucs? Nobody? Okay, well, so here I am. I'm going to write this. And then I just kept being persistent, and eventually they did let me write a couple articles. So I I'm sure they're trash. I'm sure they're absolute garbage, because that's not my That's not my strength.
Yeah.
But I have an opportunity. They're gonna Fantasy Pros, huge website. They're gonna publish my article. I'm gonna do it. So I wrote a few articles for them, and then but then we shifted over to our podcast.
So with the writing aspect, so since that's not really your baby, you guys have writers at the site. You guys, when I was talking to Kyle, he said that you guys say it one time on your podcast, and then it's kind of just like listening, word of mouth kind of thing. That's how people. Yes. What made you guys decide that that's the route that you wanted to go to get writers interested in wanting to join your site?
Because we are the first and foremost, if someone's going to write for us and be part of our brand, we want to make sure that they know who we are. Like they understand, not just they're aware of the fantasy footballers.
Right.
They understand who we are as people. They know how we present ourselves to the public. They understand the brand. And because that's honestly, that's the first thing we vet. And so that's why we don't put the call up on the website. If you want to write for us, that means you're a fan of the show and you heard it on the podcast. And because that thing goes away real fast. We put it out on a Tuesday show. We're like, hey, get it in by Sunday because we're closing it up then.
Yeah.
And so that's how that's a process. You can weed out people who are just guns for hire and know who we are, know that we have some clout in the industry, so they want their stuff on our site. It's like, no, you need to be part of our brand.
Right.
So that was the first thing we do, and that's step one. And that's honestly what we do is people write in, how much experience do you have? And immediately we go right to people's Twitter. Who are you as a person? Do you follow us?
Yeah, right?
You'd be surprised.
That is crazy.
At how many people are like, I'm a diehard fan. I want to write for your site. And you go, you don't even follow me on Twitter. Like, that's the easiest thing you could possibly
step
do.
Step one, follow them all on Twitter, please. Thank you.
But we don't want to come out and, I mean, I'm saying that right now, so hot tip for everyone trying to write for us. But we don't publicly put that out there because that's a litmus test. Are you involved in like what we're doing? You want to hear what we have to say. So that's step one. Do you seem like a good person who will fit in? Because I feel strongly that we have cultivated a team of writers that are good people, and they're like, then of course we want to make sure you can write and can do fantasy football stuff, but how do you fit with the team? That's the most important thing for us. How are you going to, because the second you get hired as a writer, I know you're going to your Twitter bio and you're putting, I write for the fantasy footballers, because you should. I want you to be proud of adding that to your Twitter bio. And I want to be proud that you put that in your Twitter bio. Like when we had already met, so when your name came through, I was like, "Holy, Casey's applying."
Shot my shot,
I'm like, this is fantastic. Like, so because I already knew, you're awesome. You're a good person, and you would bring value to the fantasy footballers writing staff. So like people. Do not undervalue who you portray that you are online, because it matters. It matters a lot, because that how you portray yourself that potentially aligns or disaligns yourself with brands out there who might be able to help get your work out there and help get you a little bit of a bigger platform.
And what's the importance of having a body of work to present to you guys, to have sample articles and things like that, to know that, they can write.
Right. I mean, it absolutely matters, but it's the last thing that we check. So we've hired, we have several people who they never wrote any fantasy football content before, and they send us like other writing. And it's like, okay, yeah, you're competent. Good. We figure we can read this. You're going to be able to translate that. And we don't pretend we're the coolest or the biggest or the best, but sometimes it works out for people when they start writing for us. Like we gave Yates, Kyle Yates, his first opportunity of public writing, big public writing, was with us. That dude's with Fantasy Pros full time now. Like Kyle, the Borg, you just had Kyle on.
I just had Kyle on. Yep.
His first step was he started writing for us, and now Kyle works full time for the Fantasy Footballers. Like, you don't know where these things are going to go. But yeah, so just as far as the writing sample, it matters, but it is the last thing that we check.
I'm not going to keep you too much longer, but I do want to know, because like you were talking about earlier, how it makes you feel to have the writers change their bios, their Twitter bios. I know you were like, okay, now it's time for you to change your Twitter bio whenever I got hired on. But how important, there's the word again, but it's Twitter. Fantasy Twitter is just something like out of control, crazy.
It's okay to say it. In fantasy football, Twitter is very, very important.
Very important. And do you think that there is going to be anything else in the next few years that's going to, take over like Twitter has?
Man, it's tough. I feel like this is a low-key Clubhouse question.
Kind of. I mean, it wasn't. I've been asking that for a while, and then like Clubhouse became a thing, and I was like, I'm jealous because I'm Android, so we don't get to check that stuff out. Yet? Nah. So, but do you think something like that or something similar?
I think that there will be things that can supplement and be additions, but the nature of the beast of fantasy football is such a news-driven game and medium, and that's what Twitter is news, right?
Yeah.
Where that's just it was built around it, just the how many what are we up to, 280 characters? I don't know, but just the foundation of the platform was built around sharing quick news and text. I know we all like. I love me some GIFs. If you follow me on Twitter, you know that my GIF game is strong. But it's a news place. While Instagram, you can share news on Instagram, and there's people who have huge fantasy football accounts on there, but I don't think they're as valuable as having a large Twitter. There's people who are massive on TikTok. I don't think it's as valuable as Twitter, because Twitter is instant news reaction. If something happens in fantasy, if you're involved in fantasy football Twitter and you're following, you're following a bunch of people, something happens, you can jump on Twitter right there and see 10 reactions to what just happened, instead of Instagram's feed deciding who you get to see, TikTok's algorithm deciding what you're wanting to watch at that time. And so I guess to go over to Clubhouse, I don't know what to make of Clubhouse yet.
Yeah.
I've been on it a couple times. I was lucky enough. I saw Barry and some other people Barry and JJ were chatting. So I jumped in. I'm like, what's going on? Then they pulled me up and I talked, and it was like, oh, this is pretty cool.
Yeah. I
still don't know what the long-term value of that platform is. But it's not an instant news reaction like Twitter. Clubhouse is an experience where I'm going to put it on, I'm going to listen to it, I'm going to try and vibe, I'm going to try and get some information. It's not get in, get out. So I think that just the nature of how Twitter works, it will remain the dominant social media platform. Other places will definitely you'll see stars rise on those platforms, but Twitter is always going to be the king, just because of how it's built.
That's excellent, because I hate having like a million different places I have to go to,
Yeah, so do we.
And with Twitter, I mean, like with the free agency news and everything, that's how I was getting all my news today, like yesterday and all that stuff, especially when you're at work and stuff, So I just wanted to know too, when it comes to like, getting your name out there, let's just say, let's just getting, how do you network with other people, or how should people network where they don't come off as rude or aggressive or like they're,
Oh,
that kind of
yeah.
stuff?
Well, number one, yes, do not be rude or aggressive. Um, like I interact with a lot of people on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
If you bring up nonsense, I don't have time for nonsense. Like I sorry, I will if I perceive any like over aggressive nature, you've been muted instantly and I no longer see you anymore. I don't have the bandwidth for it. I don't like I don't have the energy to go back and forth with you on Twitter of why this debate, like healthy debate is good, but it's you also have to recognize people's time and the amount of this. And this I really don't mean for this to sound like king of the castle, like I'm looking up in my high castle.
No.
In season, when you log in, so when you log in, you're like 20. You see the 20 plus notifications. That's every time I log in, and it's so it's hard. It's very hard now at the size of that the show we've gotten to. It's hard to interact with everybody, where that was I believe a key staple of our growth in the beginning. Man, I was a social media warrior. I responded to everything from my personal account, from our fantasy footballers account. So I highly recommend doing that. That was a huge growth strategy for our show. But I guess my number one tip for that is humor can be difficult to convey sometimes through text. And just be mindful of what you're saying. Like I've had people tweet at me where I'm like, what is this a-hole talk muted? And then like I'll show it to the guys and they read it a completely different way.
Yeah.
The tone that they read that message. I'm like, okay, maybe I overreacted or something like that. But just be careful. Tone is very hard to convey when you have 280 characters. So just reread what you're about to send twice.
Yeah. Yes, please do. I feel the same way. Sometimes I take things the wrong way and they're like, that's not what I meant. That's not what I meant. And then, yeah. So it is very difficult. And you can come off really condescending too. I feel like I do that in emails all the time. So, so I want to talk to you real quick about family life. How do you manage first and foremost to be this fantasy football rock star? And that's husband and dad, that's also a rock star. How do you find the time to make everything, worthwhile?
Man, the work and life balance is probably, I'm sure it's the hardest thing for everybody. Any parent out there, managing those two things is difficult. And step one is, thankfully, as we've grown into this position, my wife and my kids understand that in football season, things are crazy. Things are crazy for dad. Things are crazy for husband. Because it's like when I laid out, like the work week is wild, but in that time, I'm still doing my best to, like, I'm dinner. I'm the dinner man of that's on dad's responsibilities. If I like it or hate it, I'm figuring out what dinner is. So that always is a grounding thing of like, come home feeling yourself like, yeah, man, I'm doing so awesome. And they're like, yeah, but what's for dinner? You're like, oh man, I gotta bring me down. But then really trying to be intentional in the off season of ducking out early, of you recognizing when you hit that point of the workday where it's like 2:00, you're like, I could sit here and I could just, twiddle my thumbs on Twitter for 3 hours, or I'm not going to start anything else. And you just go, okay, guys, I can proceed no further today in the allotted time that I have. Everyone knows what that's like, where you're in your day job. You're like, I'm not starting another task. It's not happening. And so we have created this work culture where it's like, okay, I'm out. It's the off season. I'm out of here. Like I said, in season, we really try to you record Friday morning and you try and get out. That's that's something that we try and do, and just setting up like benchmarkers so my kids know every Friday night is pizza movie night. No matter what, Friday, I'm ordering pizza. We're gonna watch a movie, and this is like something that everyone gets to look forward to every single week. And then also in something I've recently been trying to get into this year, kind of screwed up the plans. But in August, being intentional about because we're not in football yet, and in football, Dad works all Sunday. So in August, Sunday Fun Day of okay, each week it's Sunday because I'm about to go buck nutty for work. Let's find something really fun. Like we're going bowling, we're going mini golfing, whatever it is. So just trying to find those small victories of making sure you stay connected as possible.
That's awesome. I love to hear that. I know when I had Kyle on, he said that you guys have a lot of you guys have the same values that he does, and that's why he's stuck with you guys. Not stuck with you guys, but he's been with you guys since like you said, he's basically full time now, and he started off as a writer. So, that goes hand in hand, I guess, with looking at people's Twitters to see what kind of people they are as well, to get that kind of sense of value. So it's great hearing you talk about your family like that. What do you guys do in your free time when you guys, like, besides just, the TV or the movie and the pizza night and Sunday Fun Day? What are some things that you guys really enjoy doing as a family?
So the yearly Disneyland trip is that is a must. Unfortunately, it didn't work out this year, but that was a tradition that my parents we had growing up, and because we're a 7-hour car ride from Disneyland, so it was every Christmas we're going to Disney, and we have done that as well. For my family, that was like, okay, we're locking that in. That's a tradition that's happening right now. The biggest thing for my kids, my oldest, my daughter, I've gotten her into Catan.
Okay.
So we go mano a mano with some Catan. That's a real go-to quality time of the two of us. My son, he's my sports kid. He is an athlete far superior than his father already. But so catch whatever just athletically it is. And then my youngest is Legos. He wants to sit down and build. So those are if I don't have an idea, I know that those are going to work, and those are good quality time things that I can go to in a pinch if I'm tired or I'm out of creativity of what we're going to do that day. Like, my man, let's go do some Legos. Go-tos. He's always up for that.
It's good to have those go-tos. So yes. I'm going to go ahead and let you tell everybody where they can find you and all that jazz. I know that unless they're living under a rock, they probably already know everything. But the ones that aren't following you that want to apply, and whenever they tell everybody where they can find all your stuff.
Sure, find me at FF Hitman on Twitter, and the website is thefantasyfootballers.com, and those are really the only two places you need to go.
Awesome. Yes, only two places you need to go. You heard it here. All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on with me.
Oh, come on, Casey, you're awesome. You knew I'd be on your podcast.
I'm just really happy when you were like, hey, and I was like, I know, hold on. It's been,
Look,
yeah, it's been fun.
I'm frankly upset that it took this long to ask me to show up. You put Kyle on the show before me?
Well, here's the deal. I thought by the time I got to you, I could be more, polished, but that didn't work.
There we go. That's a great answer.
Yeah. But I appreciate it. So everybody go check his stuff out, and we'll see you next time.